The Berlin Wall, symbolizing the conflict of whether to unite Germany. The Berlin Wall was more a mental image than a physical barrier. For the citizens of the divided Germany, it meant being physically unable to connect with family, friends, and neighbors on the other side of the wall as they once used to. For the rest of the world, it was a symbol of communism versus capitalism. Throughout the Cold War, the Soviet Union and NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, two great powers threatened each other with nuclear warfare, each developing their nuclear weapons. The Berlin Wall was like the start of dominoes. Going from Germany to Czechoslovakia, there were many uprisings that led to the fall of the Soviet Union. It by no means ended the Cold War on its own, but started a series of events that inevitably caused it to happen. At the end of World War II, the victors Soviet Union, USA, Britain, and France divided Germany into 4 occupation zones and Berlin into 4 sectors. Britain controlled the northwest corner, the Soviet Union controlled the northeast, USA controlled the southeast, and France controlled the southwest. Berlin was located inside of the Soviet Union's occupation zone. Each of the 4 countries in control of Germany had control of a certain part of Berlin. This made it very easy for the Soviet Union to blockade Berlin, and that's what they did in June of 1948. The Soviet Union offered to withdraw the blockade if West Germany got rid of the Deutschmark, which was a new currency the Allies had implemented. In order to get around this, the Allies airlifted supplies to citizens living in West Berlin. This went on for about a year until the Soviet Union removed the blockade in May of 1949. After the blockade, citizens moved freely around Berlin. Later in that year, the German Democratic Republic, East, and the Federal Republic of Germany, West, were formed. Many strikes occurred in the following years, including in 1949 when employees of the RBD refused to operate the railway in Berlin and West Germany. 3 years later, in March of 1952, Joseph Stalin sent a note to the other occupying powers. It included a peace treaty and promise of free elections in Germany. The big catch to the proposal was that it required the new unified Germany to not join any alliance against World War II opponents. Konrad Adenauer, the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, declined the offer. After hearing this, Stalin enforced Operation Vermin, which was designed to strengthen the border security. During this, thousands of people were removed from their homes that were living near the border. Roads were ripped up and barbed wire was laid across the entire border. Special permits were used for people to go into the border area. If they went too far, they would be shot. In January of 1953, Walter Ulbricht, the General Secretary of East Germany, created a scheme that allowed East Germans to station their own guards around the border. Between February and March, Joseph Stalin had a stroke. He went into a coma for 5 days until his death on March 5, 1953. This essentially stopped Ulbricht's plan. Fast forward to 1957, and residents were forbidden from leaving East Germany without permission. On July 25th of 1961, just days before the wall was erected, John Kennedy stated in a speech,
"Those who threaten to unleash the forces of war on a dispute over West Berlin should recall the words of the ancient philosopher, a man who causes fear cannot be free from fear. We cannot and will not permit the communists to drive us out of Berlin, either gradually or by force."
August 4th, 1961, Khrushchev responds with, "You convince yourself that we will never go to war, so you scare us expecting us to retreat. True, we will not declare war, but we will not withdraw either." Saying all this while the plans to build the Berlin Wall are in top secret. The day came just 9 days later, the day infamously known as Barbed Wire Sunday. The night before, communist officers, soldiers, and volunteers built the wall while most of the citizens were asleep in order to stop the mass exodus and economic downfall of East Germany. At this point in history, the Iron Curtain became iron bars. Just 2 months after the creation of the Berlin Wall, the two occupations tested each other by going across the border and seeing if the other stopped them or not. Stopping them to see identification if they had occupational forces license plates, violated agreements made during the Potsdam Conference of 1945. Soldiers would go across the border to escort the cars. This would continue until it prompted the Soviets to deploy 10 tanks. The U.S. had already been using tanks to escort the vehicles. They stood just 100 yards away, ready for battle. It seemed as the Cold War was to become hot until the Soviets and Americans reached mutual agreement to back away. 2 years later, John Kennedy visited Berlin and stated in a speech,
All free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin. And therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the word, Ich bin ein Berliner.
This was to show his support of the people in West Berlin. For the next 28 years, many people desperately tried to escape using many methods such as hot air balloons, tunnels, and jumping out of buildings in hope for their freedom. Nearly 80 people were unfortunate enough to die in an attempt for their freedom. Leading up to the fall of the wall, in my opinion, the most important event that happened was Ronald Reagan's speech at the Brandenburg Gate on June 21st of 1987. He famously quoted,
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
2 years later, in early November of 1989, there were 500,000 protesters at once around the Brandenburg Gate. What many people don't remember is that the Czechoslovakian border was reopened on November 1st. Around 250,000 East Germans left. At this point, with the protesting crowds and the economy dropping at rapid rates, they had no choice but to open the border. November 9th, 1989, people were finally reconnected with their families and their friends. The crowds were so large around the checkpoints that the guards decided not to check them as they passed. While the Berliners were reuniting, they yelled, Die Mauer ist weg, or the wall is gone. The icon of the Soviet Union's control for Eastern Europe was gone. On October 3rd, 1990, the German Democratic Republic became 5 federal states that joined the Federal Republic of Germany. The eastern side of the now just Germany slowly began to regain its economy. Shortly after, many events occurred that were very historically important. On December 26, 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev officially resigned from president of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union was officially dissolved. This effectively ended the Cold War and allowed NATO to remove their nuclear weapons as well. The world became much more peaceful after this without the threat of nuclear warfare. For many years after this event, there was no longer a threat. We can possibly look to the Berlin experience in solving the issues that we have with nuclear weapons today. In conclusion, the Berlin Wall may have just been concrete, but it symbolized the reign of the Soviet Union over Eastern Europe. When it vanished, the Soviet Union lost its control. Knocking over the wall was a true domino that got rid of the rest of the buildup of tension during the Cold War. Without it, the Cold War would have most likely become a hot war. On a smaller scale, people were reunited, and on a larger scale, the world no longer needed to worry about nuclear warfare. Undoubtedly, the dismantling of the wall was a great event in history.